Today we look at for loops, and these are sometimes called counting loops because they're really useful if you know exactly how many times you're going to loop, how many times you're going to repeat something. This is the structure of a for loop. The word for, and then in parentheses, an initial value of a loop variable. In this case, k is called a loop variable. So the initial value, the range, and the increment each time. So initial value, range, and increment. So the way this works is I'm starting k out at 0. I will check, is it in range? Is 0 less than 5? Yes, it is. And therefore, I will go through this loop. When I reach the curly brace at the bottom of the loop, I go up to the top. Arriving at the top, I go to the right-hand side, which may be counterintuitive. You might want to go to the left-hand side, but no, we go to the right-hand side. We do the increment or decrement to change the loop variable. We check the range. As long as it's in range, we go into the loop. Finish the loop, increment, check range. If it's in range, go into the loop again. And this is exactly like a while loop. I put the corresponding while loop here. In our while loop, we start out our counters. We have our range that we are checking. As long as it's less than 5, I will go into the loop, and then I will increment at the bottom. So wherever you can use a while loop, you can use a for loop. So most of the time when you know you're going to do something a specific number of times, use a for loop. You can certainly use a while loop, but a for loop is easier to set up. Now, just as with a while loop, you don't always have to go through it. You can certainly alter this range so that you never go through your while loop. If I make that greater than 5, so k is 0, is it greater than 5? No, I never go into the loop. And similarly here, if I make it greater than, I will not go through the loop. I don't have to start at 0. Here I'm starting at 10. Is it greater than 5? Yes. I've just created an infinite loop because greater than 5, I will go into here. It started out at 10, hit the bottom, increment, it's 11. 11 is greater than 5, and will never come out of this loop. So the only way when I am going down from 10 to 5 is to actually decrement. So I don't always have to increment. I can certainly decrement. I don't always have to start at 0. I don't have to go out up and down in ones even. Here I am decreasing by 2. So the other thing I want to point out is with the for, here is a sample for. I have 2 semicolons. So these are separators. There is no semicolon at the end of my increment or decrement here. So, and there is no semicolon at the end. If I do this, this is actually the stating that this is the end of my loop. And even though, let's put something in here. So this is a pretty good test question. how many times will high be written? And the answer is 1, because everything in these curly braces are not actually in the loop. By putting this semicolon here, you ended your loop. So you looped from I9 to 31 doing nothing. And that was this. So this was the entire loop because we put the semicolon here. And then this thing that comes after it, even though it's in curly braces, is not part of the loop, so it just prints out high one time. So be very wary of that. That's a very easy mistake for students to make, to put the semicolon here, and it is not correct. So that is not correct. I think I have hit on all of the things I wanted to talk about with for loops. Much easier to use than a while loop, but not so easy if you are doing something like entering input and looking for a -1. If you were doing that, you actually would have to write it as an infinite loop. So here is an infinite for loop, just the 2 semicolons, nothing in here. You'll recall an infinite loop with a while loop is while true something. So just 2 semicolons, nothing. This is an infinite for loop. So if you're picking up some input and you're looking for a -1, you'd have to pick up your input, check if it's a -1, and if it is, then break. Maybe the only thing I forgot to say was here I'm putting the word int. I'm declaring k right here. Here I am not declaring I. So it's possible to declare our loop variable above or outside. It would have to be before our for loop and not inside of it. If I declare it like this inside my for, then that k is only available inside here, and not if after this loop I wanted to for some reason output the value of k, the machine would not know the value of k because it died right at the bottom of this loop. K is only available in this loop because I declared it in the for statement. Here I declared it above the statement, and therefore it's available even after the loop. Okay, those are all about the for loops. Let us practice a little bit. And on Monday, we counted the first 5 numbers. And here was the while loop that we wrote. Well, with a for loop, I'm still going to have to start out my total at 0. But now I can have a for loop. I actually don't like to use I as my loop variable, only because it's hard to see on a screen sometimes. So k, I'm going to start at, or I'll use num, the same as we did in the while loop. So I'm going to start out num at 1. I'm going to go through this as long as it is less than or equal to 5. And increase it by 1 each time. And what am I going to do in my loop? I'm going to say total is whatever it was before plus num. So this is my for loop now replacing this while loop. And you can see that I've got all the essentials and they're just in different places. We're starting out total as 0. We've initialized num to 1 there and here. We've got our range the same, and at the end or the bottom of the loop, increment. And in the loop, the main thing is this. So very similar, but sometimes easier to write as a for loop. The factorial is going to be very similar. I can almost copy and paste it. So this is copied, and now I just have to make a few alterations. I'll call this product. I started out at 1, and then I want to say product is whatever it was before times num. Okay, I noticed that some of you are using the shortcuts, so instead of writing something like x equals x plus 1, you're saying x plus equals 1, which is good. Similar for the minus, instead of saying x equals x times y, you're saying x times equals y, and that's fine too, and in fact it's good. But I always in class use the longer expressions, just because I'm teaching something and this has to be absorbed by a student and make sense by a student, and I don't want to add an extra layer of confusion. So I actually in class always use the longer form, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't. So congratulations to people who are using the short form. And I think that's all that I want to say about for loops. On to some examples and exercises.